All right, well, welcome back to this semester's What Physicists Do. This is the 97th semester of What Physicists Do at Sonoma State University. So that is, in my opinion, a phenomenal achievement, and it's just a wonderful institution for us to have, to bring speakers like our speaker Laura today to campus, to give students and the public and the faculty a chance to learn about so many interesting things at an institution like ours. I'm lucky to have a fairly easy time introducing our speaker today because our speaker's talk is actually kind of her introduction. So from my point of view, our speaker is Laura Sparks, a fabulous colleague that we've worked with from the SRJC, and I know many of our students have taken classes with them before transferring to us, and our transfer students from the SRJC are amongst some of our very best, so we're always pleased to have connections with that institution. Our speaker will be telling you all about herself through her talk. If you're interested and if you enjoy and want to talk to her more, then we will be going out for dinner with our speaker tonight. We'll be going to the Racer 5 Brew Pub in Runner Park, close to the Doubletree Hotel. So if you're interested, come and speak to me at the end and we can arrange to meet up there. But otherwise, thank you for doing the introduction for me, preemptively.
You're welcome.
And let's give a warm welcome to our very first speaker.
Well, thank you so much. So I'm really been looking forward to coming and meeting with you and speaking with you. I wanted to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to discuss today. So this is not going to be a technical talk. There won't be a lot of scientific details today. It's a different sort of talk. Instead, I wanted to talk to you about sort of my career journey and how I got my education, how I got a job, something some of you might be interested in doing eventually, and what I've been doing teaching at the community college. Now, I actually took, Tom told me there are 8 people here who are taking the class for credit. Is that right? So I actually took this class for credit a few years back for fun, and so it's nice to be on the other side for once. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you about how I came to be a teacher at Santa Rosa Junior College, because along my path, I found a lot of interesting careers that were possibilities that I had never thought of when I was an undergraduate. And so a lot of you in the room right now are undergraduates, and I want you to know and just start to open your mind and think about ways that paths that you might take or possibilities that are open to you after you get a degree in science. I also want to talk about some of the experiences I've had as an educator, because it turns out that teaching at a community college opens up a lot of doors and paths to do really interesting things that I couldn't do just on my own as a private citizen, and that have been really amazing. So I'm going to talk about some collaborations that I've had with other people in the community. And most recently, I just got back from an expedition to Chile that I went on to see all of the observatories and telescopes in Chile. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that too, because I learned about a lot of interesting job opportunities there, and I wanted to share those with you. Okay, there's 3 main things I want you to take away from this talk. Okay, so I'll come back to these at the end, and we'll see them again. One, these are things that I've learned through a lot of years of hard work and making a lot of mistakes. So I can make the mistakes for you, and you can learn from this. One, always be open to new paths. So as you're trying to decide what your career is going to be, just keep your mind as open as possible to things that you haven't thought of or opportunities that might not even have occurred to you yet. Find a career that matches your personality. So when I was going to school, I was sort of obsessed with, what topic am I most interested in? What classes are the most interesting, that I'm going to learn about the most interesting things. And I don't think that that's the most important thing when you decide on a career. You don't need to work in a topic that's interesting to you, although it's nice. It's a really nice bonus. You need to work in a career that matches your personality, that you're personally happy working in that environment. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And last but not least, I want you to think about global possibilities. Like, what are some places you could work or some things that you could do with your life that could take you all over the world? Okay, so I'll kind of try to open up some interesting things you might not have thought of. Okay, first I'm going to give you a quick overview of how I got to where I am, just really, really fast. I've gone through so many different iterations of things that I wanted to be when I grow up. It's ridiculous, right? So I went through a marine biology phase, newspaper phase, all these different things. And then when I was in 7th grade, I took the first science class that really challenged me. And one of the things my science teacher in 7th grade had us do was she put all these different skulls on the table. I don't think they were real. I think they were like replica skulls. And we had to go draw the skulls and make really detailed observations about what do the skulls look like? What could we learn about the skulls? And I spent hours and hours and hours sketching these Homo habilis, Homo erectus, different skulls. And I got a C on my sketches because I'm not very good at drawing. So that was kind of disappointing. And I still remember it, even though I was like 12 when this happened. But anyway, so I decided I wanted to be an anthropologist. Now, as I got into high school, I was really involved in like band and orchestra. I was like a band nerd. So I wanted to be a trombone player. So I completely changed my career path entirely. I was going to be a professional trombone player. I took lessons like constantly. I was playing the trombone about 20 hours a week in rehearsals and all kinds of different things. And I had this plan. I'm going to be a trombone player. That's my plan. Okay, now eventually I realized that if I actually wanted to be a professional trombone player, I was going to have to practice for like 2 to 3 hours a day while I was in high school and then like really amp that up when I got to college. And then I decided I didn't want to be a professional trombone player anymore. So that plan went out the window. I was like, yeah, I used to want to be an anthropologist. Let's go back to that. Now, what I decided to do, we had a career day, like a job shadowing day my senior year of high school. So I went out and I grew up in Phoenix, by the way. So I went up and job shadowed an anthropologist in Phoenix. And I went out in, I think it was like September. So it was actually really hot in Phoenix. And we walked around the desert looking for broken shards of pottery. And it was awful, and I hated it. So that was the end of that. So no more anthropologists. Yeah. Didn't take much to dissuade me. So already you're starting to see this theme of like, be open to different paths, right? Don't worry about changing your mind. That is fine. So when I finally got to college, I decided, when I was a senior, after the anthropology thing fell through, I decided I wanted to be an engineer. I went to Arizona State University, and my very first semester there, I could not get into the Engineering 101 class. It was too impacted. They didn't have enough seats. I couldn't enroll for it. So my counselor said, well, just take physics instead, and you can take engineering next semester, and it'll be fine, and you won't get thrown off too much. So I took the Physics 101 class, and then I just decided, hey, I don't think I want to be an engineer. I'm just going to be a physicist. So I changed my major. Okay, now when I graduated from Arizona State with a degree in physics, my plan was to be a particle physicist. And I always wanted to go someplace. Okay, if you grow up in Phoenix, has anybody been there in the summer? It's awful. It's sorry if I offend anyone, but it's a horrible place. And just the weather, and you have to be on the freeway. Anyway, it's awful. So I always wanted to leave, and I wanted to go someplace where they had seasons, and they had like leaves on the trees and beautiful weather and snow and all of this. So I decided to move to Massachusetts, and I went to graduate school at the University of Massachusetts. But while I was there, I changed my plan from being a particle physicist to something else, which I'll tell you in a minute. Okay, so far, some advice I can already give you based on what how far I've gotten so far in my story up to grad school. 1, learn how to code. Okay, that's the number 1 piece of advice, because as soon as I got to graduate school, I started, about a few months after I got to graduate school, I started having to write software to analyze data, and I didn't know how to do that at all. And it was extremely stressful because going to graduate school is hard enough already when you're taking all your classes and trying to balance all of these different things that you're expected to do, plus teaching yourself different software languages while you're doing that wasn't super fun. So I would highly recommend that you learn some program. If you plan to go, even if you're not going to go to graduate school, I think that this is good advice for just about any student who wants to work in any remotely scientific or technical field. Like, just learn how to code. Do research. So if you are planning to go on with any kind of career in science, if you can do any kind of real research now, that will help you. I don't mean go write a research paper by going to the library and like looking things up. That's not what I mean by research. I mean, get involved with actual experiments. And there's a program called Research Experience for Undergraduates, REU. I did an REU between my junior and senior year of college. And they told me, when I got to grad school, they told me that helped me get admitted. And that helped me get into grad school, that I had done the REU. Okay, so that's important. And I think probably the most important thing is to surround yourself with the right people. So what I mean by that is while you're in school, if you can make sure that your friends that you're spending your time with, that you're studying with, people you know from your classes, that they have sort of the same goals that you do, that they're serious about their futures and they're serious about going on in if it's science that you want to do, if they're serious about going on in science, just by being around those people, you're going to find out 90% of what you need to know to be successful in college and to be successful in graduate school. Like, if I had just been going it alone, I probably would have missed like 10 important deadlines trying to get into graduate school. But because I was surrounded by the right people, they'd be like, oh, did you turn this in yet? Oh, that's when's that due? Tomorrow? Oh, crap. You know, if I hadn't had that person next to me, I probably would have missed that deadline. Just stuff like that. And you're going to find out about opportunities and find out about things that, you know, that are really going to help you just by being around the right people. And last but not least, be aware of imposter syndrome. Okay, so have you guys heard of this before? It's the idea that, how can I say, it's really tempting to feel like you don't belong where you're at, or that like you're not qualified to be doing what you're doing. Like, for example, most of the talks I've come to at SSU have been extremely like in this room, have been extremely technical. They've been researchers from Stanford or Yale or just these incredible places giving these talks about amazing cutting edge research. And now here I am standing in front of you and I'm a community college teacher. I have to fight down imposter syndrome right now. Say, do I deserve to even be here in front of you talking? Well, of course I do, because this is a series about what physicists do, and I'm going to tell you what I do. So that's fine. But you're going to experience that too. You're going to experience imposter syndrome at some point in your career, in your educational career, and you have to fight against that, because if you're going to school and you're taking your class and doing what you're supposed to do, then you belong there, right? So it's just something to pass on. Okay, so when I went to University of Massachusetts, I chose to go to UMass because, like I said, I wanted to go somewhere with beautiful weather and all of this. I mean, I really didn't have a deep thought process on selecting graduate school. I was only 20 years old when I was applying all this stuff. So here's what the pictures look like on the website. Now, when I got there, here's the building that I actually spent 95% of my time in at UMass. I was up on the 11th floor of this, and I just saw in that I was actually Googling because I'm going to go visit, and I was Googling around about this, the science department there. And I just saw in the news a couple weeks ago that they had like detected all this like PCB contamination in the building, and like people who work there were increased risk of cancer and all this. I'm like, oh my God. So this was not a great building. And even 10 years, 20 years after I'm gone, I'm still learning new bad things about this building. But anyway, so I worked up here on the 11th floor. And I learned during my time at UMass that so when I started there, I wanted to be a particle physicist. I was going to discover the secrets of the fundamental particles of the smallest things in the universe. And I discovered while I was there that I didn't actually want to do that anymore. First of all, I found a research project that was more on the astronomy side of things, and I decided I wanted to switch fields, like topics, and learn about astronomy in the sky instead of learning about these little particles. And second, I discovered that I didn't really want to be a researcher at all. I didn't enjoy research. I spent a lot of time working sort of pseudo-independently, writing software, trying to analyze code. It was really frustrating, and which you guys are successful students, so you know that the feeling of frustration is the feeling of learning, right? As you overcome frustrations, that's when you know you're actually learning things. So it was fulfilling in that way, but it just wasn't for me. And the only thing that was really making me happy while I was in graduate school was the teaching that I was doing. So I was teaching like physics labs to undergrads, and I really enjoyed that. So I decided that I was going to change course. First of all, I got more, I'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, I got more interested in astronomy, and second of all, that I was gonna maybe not finish my PhD. And I actually stopped with a master's degree and decided to go into teaching. So this picture, that's my friend Jake. That building that I showed you, even though it's like negative 1,000 degrees outside during this picture. The interior of the building was always really hot because they would crank the heat and then it would be like 85 degrees or 80 degrees and it would be just miserable. And then the windows wouldn't open, I think because they didn't want anyone to kill themselves. So they just kept the windows like shut and locked. So we would, like, I shared an office with 6 or 7 other people and it was always really muggy in there. So people would kind of doze off from time to time. So we got into this running kind of thing of if anybody fell asleep in the grad student office, you would try to peg them in the face with a wet tea bag and you'd see how far across the room you could get and still land on their face. So that kind of just overlapped into the rest of our lives too. So that was my friend Jake. He had fallen asleep, so anyway. Okay, while I was at UMass, I worked on a project called Veritas, which is a gamma ray telescope project. And that was the first chance I got to go sort of be involved with large telescopes. And I got to kind of climb around on the telescopes and help install cables on them, which was super fun. And there I am, like actually young, a long time ago on that telescope. Okay, so after I left UMass, I was so burned out on science because my grad school experience had been like really, really intense that I took a year off. And during that year, I did a bunch of stuff. I did some tutoring, I went on some trips, and I worked, actually just thought, maybe I'll be a politician. Maybe I'll just change careers entirely. And I went and worked at the state senate at Arizona. In Arizona, I got to like give drinks to, I gave a drink to the governor of Arizona one time at the senate. Anyway, I mostly like brought drinks to people just to like learn about what it was like. And then I thought, well, politics is worse than science. So I'm going back to science. After a year, I had had enough of everything else and I realized, I was just a little burned out from grad school, but this is actually what I want to do. So I applied for jobs all over the place, like all over the country. And in that first round of applications, I got 2 job offers. I got an offer to run the physics labs and supervise all of the graduate students who, like teaching assistants at the University of Nebraska. And I got a job offer to help with the science labs at Las Positas College and also be able to teach part-time there. Now, the one at Nebraska paid more. It was a more senior position, kind of was a better opportunity, I think. But I decided to go to Las Positas College because I wanted to teach. And I didn't think I was going to be able to follow that teaching path at the Nebraska job. So I often wonder what my life would have been like if I had taken that. It's very rare in life that you have this branch and your life would just be totally different on one or the other. But so who knows? I don't know what it would have been like. But I decided to move to Las Positas College. Now, during that job search time, I had a master's degree in physics. I knew that I wanted to teach, but it's incredibly difficult to go straight out of school into a full-time teaching job. So I looked for lots of different sorts of jobs that I could do, and I found a lot of interesting things. So I want you guys, if you're going on in science, these are some sorts of things that you could consider as possibilities. And a lot of these can be done with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. It sort of depends on the level. But so my first science job out of grad school was a lab technician and coordinator at Las Positas College. So this is somebody who's going to help like set up the labs, like write the labs in some cases, help the students who are in the labs. As really similar positions, an instructional assistant at the JC, we employ the what are called science lab instructional assistants who help with the labs and help to run these things. So those are opportunities that you can get. And I know several people who have started out in these sorts of positions and eventually moved on to like full-time teaching jobs. Or I also know people who've just stayed in those kinds of positions for their whole career and found them really fulfilling. So that's something to think about. Like my other job offer back then was to be the graduate student coordinator at the University of Nebraska. So it's kind of a behind the scenes job that's really hands-on, involved with learning and involved with teaching, but not directly teaching. There are lots of planetariums throughout the country. So if you're in astronomy, there are jobs supporting planetariums. I applied for one at San Francisco State, actually. They did not hire me. I think it's because I had no experience at all with planetariums whatsoever. So it was kind of like a miracle that I even got an interview. But anyway, so that's the kind of job that exists. Okay, and then let's see, after 3 years at Las Positas College, after teaching part-time in astronomy there for a few years, I was hired at Santa Rosa Junior College, and I've been teaching there for 10 years. So just some advice. This is everything I can distill of advice for getting a job related to your degree. So in other words, if you graduate with a physics degree and you want to get a job working just connected to that somehow, here's what I would do. Be willing to move. That's the number one thing. If you're willing to move, it opens up 1,000 possibilities. Trying to get a job is sort of a numbers game. The more you can apply, the more different things you can apply to, the better your chances, obviously. That's how I got my job in Phoenix. That's how I got my job. That's how I got my job in Las Positas. That's how I got my job at the JC in Santa Rosa. That's how I got into graduate school, is just being willing to move. If I had stayed in Phoenix, where I grew up, and tried to get a job there in astronomy, I don't think that I would have been successful, just because there's not that many openings in any one particular place. So if you want to get a job, the easiest way to do it is be willing to move. Also, don't have one set path in mind. I didn't plan to be an astronomy teacher. I actually planned to be a physics teacher. But when I went to Las Positas, I kept asking, let me teach a physics class. I want to teach a physics class. And there were just too many people who already were teaching the physics classes. They said, you could teach astronomy. And I said, okay. That's interesting, because I've only taken like one astronomy class in my life. But I was actually found out that I knew enough to do it and could do a good job at it. So I did that, and I just completely changed paths. So the more you're open to changing your path, the more success you're going to have. Say yes to opportunities. So when somebody offers you an internship, or there's a possibility to work in an interesting lab, just do it if you can. if it's feasible, because you never know when that's going to turn out to be useful later on. I'll give you an example. When I worked at Las Positas College, I had the opportunity to go for a summer and volunteer at Bryce Canyon National Park in their astronomy program. Now, I had a lot of other things going on in my life, because I was about to move from Las Positas to Santa Rosa Junior College and totally uproot and move, and I had only like 2 months to do that. And during those 2 months, instead of like preparing my life and probably, doing what would have been more wise and getting ready for my new job, I just went to Bryce Canyon, and I spent the whole summer in Utah because I had that opportunity. And that turned out to be really important, because I learned a lot about astronomical observing and like small telescopes that I've been using ever since then. So the more you can say yes to things and just try things and do them, the better. So like, let's say you're on a path and you're saying, okay, I'm going to be a physics major, and I want to work in this branch of physics. And then you have an opportunity to do a research experience that's more related to software or chemistry or something else. Just do it. You never know where it's going to lead, and you might like it more than the thing you're planning to do anyway. So just be willing to change your plan and try new things. Okay, so if you're interested in teaching as a community college instructor, I said I was going to talk about what physicists do, so I'll tell you what I actually do. I teach classes, obviously. Now, what goes into that? There's a lot of preparation, a lot of behind-the-scenes work, a lot of tedious detail work to do that. And then I show up with all that preparation and teach the classes. One thing that surprised me when I started teaching at a community college was how much psychology is involved with being a community college teacher. I can't tell you how many times a student has walked into my office and just sort of like broken down crying. And I don't know why. And now there's just this like crying person sitting in my office, and I got to figure out what to do with that, and how can I help them, and what the heck is going on. And students come to class with a whole set of stuff that's going on outside of the classroom in their lives. And as a teacher, you have to figure out how to help them through that and how to deal with that. So there have been a lot of interesting challenges that I faced as a teacher, and it's really been a lot of growth. We had an interesting challenge this summer. Keith Waxman, some of you know him. You want to tell them what happened to the telescopes this summer?
Oh, the one tell?
Yeah, number 4.
The story of what happened in the what happened to the one telescope?
Yeah.
You want me to tell that story?
Well, I'll tell it if you
No,
don't
I
want
can
to.
tell it.
Yeah.
You mean the one, I'm just want to make sure this is the right story before I tell it. The one that we, that was.
The one that had to be cleaned.
Okay, all right, this is the right story. I was afraid of that. No, the telescopes had to be stored in a different area because we're making room for physics to join us, and I opened up a telescope to pull it out for a demonstration we had in our Astronomy 12 class, and I noticed it smelled like ammonia. I said, yeah, I just was recently cleaned. Then I realized the smell wasn't exactly ammonia, but it was, how should I say this? I'll just say urine. Yeah, that something or someone had urinated on the scope. And I hope this is the story, Laura.
This is the one I want.
And yeah, we didn't know what happened. It would have been an animal. I would think that it might have been a person that was, and we couldn't understand what happened. But all I knew is that I was the one who grabbed it, and Laura didn't have to grab it.
No, I was in Chile.
Yeah, Laura,
This was great.
yeah, and I think Laura was that she's glad it wasn't that she was the one that didn't pull it out of there. It was me. And so we had to deal with that, and
Yeah.
we never figured out what happened. But luckily, our technician Don Dalby was nice enough to clean it up, and it just was very peculiar about how that got in there.
So this is the sort of thing that I think it illustrates just that it's always something new. Like teaching at a community college, you never quite know what to expect. There's always some weird thing going on that you got to deal with, and it really keeps you on your toes, and it's a really fun job because of that. And it was really great to be out of town when that happened. And you emailed me about it, and I was with my fellow travelers, and I was like, wow, I'm going to read you this interesting email I just got from home. Good thing I'm not there. Anyway. Another thing that community college instructors participate with is what's called shared governance at the college, which means it's basically really boring. It's just like doing the class schedule and doing evaluations and doing budgets and committee work. So there's all this work that needs to be done to sort of keep the school running and keep things organized, and community college instructors are expected to participate in that. But it's also really fulfilling because you get to know people around the school, you get to work with a lot of different kinds of people, and that's really been fun for me. As a community college teacher, I get to collaborate with my colleagues. I work with people in my department and also outside of my department in other departments. And that's really, really fun for me because I get to work on projects with like a psychology teacher and a speech teacher, and we can put together a unit that all the students are going to do together, and it's just so much fun. I also get to collaborate with amateur and professional astronomers throughout Sonoma County. So like I get to come do a talk like this with you at Sonoma State. And have any of you been to the Robert Ferguson Observatory? Oh, if not, you got to go there. It's awesome. It's up in Kenwood, about 20 minutes east of the JC campus, up in Sugarloaf Ridge State Park. And they've got a couple of enormous telescopes. You can go up on certain Saturday nights and see for yourself. It's really, really awesome. I bet your instructor would probably give you extra credit for going to that if you ask him. Put you on the spot. But the reason I'm mentioning this is I want to go back to those 3 points. Remember I said there were 3 takeaways I wanted you to have? Number 1 was what was number 1? Be open to new paths. I didn't want to word it wrong. Okay, and number 2 was find a career that matches your personality. So my personality is that I really like to be around people, and I really like to collaborate and be part of a community, and that's really super duper important to me. And that wasn't getting fulfilled enough for me doing research. I wanted to be teaching. I really wanted to be part of a broad community with lots of different people in different fields. And so being able to, as a community college teacher, collaborate with my colleagues and collaborate with the community, that's really important for me personally. So that's helped me to find, that's how my current job matches my personality. Okay. And one of my favorite things about teaching is I get to play at astronomy. I don't actually have to do astronomy research. I just have to teach it, which means my job is not to necessarily discover new things, but to take new things that other people are discovering and get the world excited about them. And that's my job. And so I get to just learn new things and get excited about them and then share that with people, which is so fun. So just an example I'll give you from the other day. I'm on sabbatical right now writing a lab manual for the JC, and I was working on some spectroscopy stuff, which is like measuring the colors of light and the amount of light of different colors that comes in through a telescope. And I had this very technical book that I was reading. It's like a grad level textbook on spectroscopy, trying to understand something. And I got bogged down in this chapter in the math, and it was pretty serious math. So I was reading it and having a little bit of trouble with it. And then I thought, you know what? I don't need to keep reading this. I got the basic idea of this chapter. I'm just going to skip to the next chapter. I don't have any homework. I don't have to write a paper about this. I just needed to learn it to the level that I feel comfortable and move on. And for me, that's awesome. Like, as an undergrad, I remember, you can't do that. You get stuck on some math, you got to power through and understand it. As a community college teacher, it's a little more low key. I just need to understand it enough to get other people excited about it and explain it, but I don't actually have to chug through and do all the really tedious hard work to learn things. So that's pretty fun. I also get to go to trainings and conferences. That sounds really dry, but like, for example, I want to go to the American Astronomical Society conference this year, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go. Let me see where it's at. And I typed in to look it up. Oh, it's in Hawaii. It's on Waikiki, on Honolulu. I'm going to go to that. So that's going to be fun. And since I'm really just there to understand and learn as much as I can and kind of network with people, if I get tired or bored in a talk, I can go out to the beach because I'm just a community college teacher. So it's great. It's like the best of both worlds. Okay, in case any of you, if this has piqued your interest, I'll go through this quick. If any of you are thinking, wow, that's like an interesting career, I might want to be a community college teacher, I'm uniquely qualified to tell you how to do that. So to get a job, the first step, everything else that I'm going to say applies to teaching part-time as well to various degrees. But the first step is you want to get a part-time job at a community college because it's very, very difficult to walk straight into a full-time job without experience. So you want to teach part-time for a few years. To get the interview, this is the first thing. If you're willing to move, that'll make everything easier. It's really, really hard to get a job. There's a few people who've done it, but it's hard to get a job at a specific place that you want to be. If you're willing to move, it really increases your chances. If you can get your foot in the door teaching part-time somewhere, teach as many different classes as you can. Try to push and get the people at the school to give you, like if you're a physics teacher, try ask if you can teach astronomy. Try to get teaching in different fields because it'll help you, make you more employable for lots of different positions. While you're there at the school, participate in curriculum development, which means like help writing classes, help, basically writing outlines for what courses are supposed to cover and what people are supposed to learn in the classes. Get involved with that. Basically anything that you can volunteer to do, just volunteer to do it to get some experience because you can put all of that on your resume. And last but not least, if there's anything you can get involved with advancing the interests of like underrepresented groups, like women or just any kind of minorities that are like not as represented in STEM, then that will really help. Almost every college that I've applied to had some kind of question about like, how have you demonstrated a commitment to or appreciation of diversity in your life, and how have you worked with diverse groups successfully? So that's really important. And if you're, just for astronomy specific, if you can get hands-on experience with telescopes, that'll help too. Once you've gotten an interview, and this applies not just to community college jobs, but probably to a lot of other jobs too. The people in the interview want you to do well. So anytime you're in a job interview, remember that. I can guarantee you that's true because I've been on the other side, like giving a lot of job interviews. And I always want the person to do well because every single time I want that person to be so good that I can just say, okay, done. We don't have to do any more of these. That's the person we're hiring. They're great. And then my problem's solved because now I have a person for my position, right? We always want them to do well. So don't feel, sometimes like when I used to go into interviews, I would feel like everyone was staring at me, like judging me, just ready to pounce on any mistake I made. I was so wrong about that. Like maybe there's some really evil people out there that are like that, I don't think so. I think most of the time the people in the interview want you to do well. If you're going to work at a community college, it's really important to understand what the population is like there. Like, you want to know how old the students are, what their academic preparation would be like, and just have kind of like a realistic idea of what it would be like to teach there. Because sometimes people come in and apply for jobs and they have they just have no idea what a community college is all about, and you're worried that they would just flounder when they started teaching there. So you want to like do a little bit of research. Be prepared to talk about diversity. There's almost always going to be a question about that. And for government jobs, this isn't just astronomy jobs, but a lot of government jobs, the people giving the interview usually have like a very rigid grading scale where there's question 1 and I'm allowed to give 0 to 4 points on question 1 and here are the criteria. And so they're going to ask you a question and you have to answer the question that they asked. You know, like if you watch politicians on TV, like during the debates, you know, somebody asks a question and then they just give a prepared speech about something sort of tangentially related. It's not going to work in a government job interview because if you don't answer the thing that they asked you, they're not allowed to give you like points for that answer. And they have to give you points for answering the question. So that's, listen carefully for what question is being asked and make sure you answer that question to get points. Okay, and then during job interviews, it's really important to give examples. Sometimes people will say, oh yeah, you know, you ask somebody, how would it be like teaching a large class? Like, what would your feelings about that be? Like, oh, I'd love to teach a large class. I enjoy big crowds, things like that. It's not a great answer. A better answer would be like, oh, well, I taught a large class at this institution, and here's how successful I was, and here's how it worked. So if you can give examples from your own experience, that's better. And then the teaching demo, for any teaching job, a teaching demo is extremely important. There have been a ton of candidates that I've seen applying for jobs who come in, talk about how they would teach, and do an amazing interview. And then we have a teaching demo where they're gonna like give a 10-minute presentation. And first of all, they don't necessarily do any of the things they said they would do in the interview. And second, they're just not prepared, or the demonstration's just not good. And it's really disappointing. It's so disappointing when you interview somebody first and they seem great, and then you get up to watch them teach and it's like not gonna be good. So the demo is like extremely important. If you say that you like to do interactive things in your class and engage students with group work or stuff like that, then do that in your teaching demo. Like show that that's how you would actually teach the class. And I know this is super detailed if you're not wanting to be a teacher, so I'll be all done in just a second, but also just the demo can redeem anything. Like if the interview went poorly, just be really good in the teaching demo and you probably might get the job anyway. Because primarily people are just looking for good teachers. Okay, so that's about it for the first couple of bits of my talk. So I talked about my journey teaching at a community college. Now with the little time we have left, I want to talk a little bit about some experiences that I've had recently, because I think this highlights some of the really amazing possibilities and things that you can do as a community college teacher. Okay, so very recently I was accepted to be an ACEP ambassador. ACEP stands for Astronomy in Chile Educational Ambassadors Program. And I went on an expedition in July to several different observatories in Chile and got behind the scenes access to all these different facilities and scientists and learned all kinds of stuff. So Chile is in South America. I was really amazed at how similar it was to California, actually. They're between the Pacific Ocean on the west and a mountain range on the east, which is pretty similar. In the north, it's desert, just like in the south of California, there's desert. And also they have a plate subducting beneath the continental plate just like we do. So they have lots of earthquakes and volcanoes along the coast and things. So it really felt similar. In fact, we got away from the airport and there were just all of these vineyards and it looked exactly like Sonoma County. It was kind of creepy. I was like, I've traveled halfway around the world and it just looks the same. It was interesting. But one thing that makes Chile a really good place for astronomy is the geography keeps the clouds away from Chile in this really remarkable way. So here's a picture taken from the International Space Station of Chile, and you can see the clouds coming in from sort of the more like rainforest area here, getting stopped by the Andes mountain range. And then there's another little mountain range that's not as high, but there's a range along the coast that kind of blocks clouds from the ocean. So often there'll be clouds all over South America except Chile. Chile's just clear, and you can use your telescopes and see the sky really well. So we went to a couple different observatories in Chile. One was the Gemini Observatory. Has anybody been there before? A couple people? Okay, so there's two. The day that I went, there was I just put this in because I love this picture. There was a big, huge readout of all these different statuses and how the mirror and all this stuff, and then it all came down to just good. The telescope is good today. I thought that was pretty funny. Okay, so Gemini Observatory. Gemini means twins. It's the twins in the zodiac. So it's a pair of telescopes. There's one in Hawaii, and there's one in Chile on Cerro Pachon, which is the name of the mountain in Chile that it's located on. And the two telescopes are basically identical. They have some different instruments on each one, but they are constructed pretty similarly. So I got to go to Gemini South in Chile. I thought I'd just share with you what the road up there looked like. It was kind of a scary road. Our bus driver was extremely adventurous, and he didn't feel the need to slow down around curves or anything. So I had to close my eyes a few times. But it's very arid. There's hardly any vegetation. It's really, really dry. Everybody on the trip, their hands and knuckles were kind of like the skin was cracking a little bit just from the dryness going up. When we got up to the top, the elevation there was about 8,000 feet. And there's a picture of the Gemini telescope from the outside. So there's a giant dome around it, and then inside the telescope has a diameter of about 8.1 meters, which is about 24 feet. So we got to go in and see this monster. It was just an amazing telescope. Okay, a couple different discoveries that have been made recently by Gemini, just to kind of give you an idea of what it does. One, there was a planet discovered called 51 Eridani B, and it was imaged with a special instrument called, that's a planet finder stuck on the Gemini telescope. So they've discovered new planets here. Another discovery was they discovered this molecule hydrogen sulfide in Uranus's atmosphere. I got such a kick out of this because we got to meet with the director of the science director at Gemini, and he said that they got like no traction with this headline. Nobody was that interested in it until they reworded it to talk about like rotten eggs and things and how it would smell like rotten eggs. And now that that headline like went viral. So it was kind of an interesting lesson in marketing your discoveries to make people more interested in them. Okay. And then, have any of you heard of the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope? This is this huge, beautiful telescope that's coming online soon. And it's going to be imaging the entire sky like every couple of days and just taking these really fast photographs of the entire sky. So one of the major highlights that I was looking forward to on this trip was getting to see it under construction because it's being built right now. And the closest they let us get to it was right here. So that was my view of, here's Gemini, and here's the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope. We never got any closer to it than that. But the reason I want to show them in this same picture is in the future, one of the things Gemini is going to be doing is lots of like follow-up images of things that are discovered by the LSST. So this telescope will take like big pictures of big parts of the sky, find things that, ooh, something new that we discovered that's interesting to look at, and then Gemini will point at that thing and then learn more about it. So since they're located so close together, Gemini is going to be really good at like doing follow-up observations for things that this big, awesome telescope discovers. Okay, now in Chile, there's several different observatories, and some of them are pretty close together. So this was up on a mountain called Cerro Pachon, and this was the view looking out from here that way at sunset. You can you see the telescopes off in the distance? Yeah, there's another mountain called Cerro Tololo, and there's some telescopes up on the top of that. So after sunset, we got back in the car with the scary driver, and then we drove all the way down these little windy roads and then all the way up to Cerro Tololo. So there's a picture of kind of the main telescopes up there. This was the first place I got a good view in my whole life of the large and small Magellanic Clouds. So I took that picture on my first night at Cerro Tololo. And there you can see this is a kind of famous telescope, a 4-meter Blanco telescope in the background and the Magellanic Clouds. You can just, if you're not that familiar with astronomy, there's a lot of non-majors here. You can't see these from the northern hemisphere. You have to go to the southern hemisphere to see them. And it's a couple dwarf galaxy or irregular galaxies outside the Milky Way. And then I took this photo of our group. So we went on this expedition. I'm not in the picture because I am in the picture, sort of. I had to like go along like this with a red flashlight and draw all those letters. So you can't really see me, but I went through and wrote all those letters. And that was our group. This is called the 4-meter Blanco telescope at Cerro Tololo. And we got to go inside and see it. And there's this giant instrument on it called Decam. Does anyone have a guess what DE might stand for? I know the astronomers know. Any students of Waxman? Guesses? Nobody? Yeah.
Dark energy?
Dark energy, exactly right, yeah. So this is the dark energy camera. It's trying to measure a lot of information about supernovas and try to learn about the expansion rate of the universe, dark energy. Okay. And, I just wanted to show you, because this is the interior of the dome, and then they opened up the dome for us so we could look outside and just enjoy the view. So I wanted to show that you just a quick video so you can feel what it was like to be there. And while this was happening, things were also spinning around on the inside. It was really disorienting, but really cool. I would kill to live in a place where I opened up my window and saw something like this. And then you can see some other telescopes sort of right around the 4-meter. Okay, and then the view, we stayed in a dormitory there, and from the dorm you can sort of see those windows up in the distance. So that's when you open up the telescope, that's what it looks like from far away. All right, so after we left Cerro Tololo, we got to go to the northern part of Chile, which is even drier and even more deserty. And I found there's a little town there called San Pedro de Atacama, and it was so interesting. There were all these little businesses doing astrotourism. So here's a whole nother career opportunity that you might never have thought of, astrotourism. People in this area will take expeditions of tourists out into the desert and then that sounds bad, that starts badly. Take the tourists out of the desert. They take the tourists out in the desert and then set up telescopes and show them the sky and show them, because a lot of people come from the northern hemisphere, and when you go to the south, it's all different constellations and stars than you can see at home. So there's a lot of astrotourism there. So I loved this, the stars of the south. And then there was one, I just loved the name of this business. And I thought that they were the ones who thought of that name, but later on when I was reading, like Googling them, I found that there was this really wacky show from the 60s in Spanish called Amigos del Espacio. If you want to kick in the pants, just look at it. It's really interesting. It's like a documentary, but it's fun. Okay, and then we drove up from that area to what's called the Atacama Large Millimeter Array, or the Alma Telescope. And along the way, we saw several vicuñas, which are sort of relatives of llamas. And we got to stay at the Alma dorms where the workers stay, which I was told was a great honor. The dorm wasn't that great, so it didn't feel like that big of an honor, but I was told it was. Anyway, Alma is one of the most spectacular things I think that has ever been built. So if you're like a student from Waxman's class or something, you haven't heard of this, it's an amazing, I just can't state how amazing this facility is. So what it is there's 66 antennas. They look like satellite receiver dishes, only they're really big. Some of them are 12 meters across, some of them are 7 meters across, so they're huge. And they can be set up in different configurations, and they all look at the same thing together at the same time. So when sometimes they pack them close together so that they're only separated by maybe a couple football fields. And then they can also load these things up onto really heavy duty vehicles and move them around so they're separated by up to 16 kilometers or about 10 miles separation. This whole thing is laid out on a really high altitude plain up in the mountains. It's at about 17,000 feet elevation. And it looks at sort of the wavelength of light sort of in between radio and infrared. The thing that's most impressive about this to me is it's a global partnership. So the US is responsible for about a third of the funding of this, and it's also jointly run by Europe and Japan. So this is something so big, so expensive, so complicated that no one country could have a chance of doing it together. So it's sort of like a worldwide collaboration in Chile, and of course cooperation with Chile as well. It employs about 700 people worldwide, and about 200 people work there at the telescope site. Now, some of you have probably seen the famous black hole picture that came out a few months ago. If you haven't seen it, this is the first picture ever taken of a black hole. And you can see the black hole would actually be right in here in this area, and then light from the accretion disk around it. So ALMA was part of a worldwide global telescope called the Event Horizon Telescope, where they hooked up telescopes all over the entire world to get this picture. And they showed us while we were there that if you took out the contribution of ALMA from that picture, here's what the picture looks like. There's no black hole in the picture anymore. So ALMA was, it wasn't solely responsible for this black hole picture, but without it, the picture wouldn't have been possible. Another really important discovery they've made at ALMA was they took a picture of this star HL Tauri, and you can actually see the disk of matter around it that planets are forming out of. So that's a picture of planets in the process of being born around this star right now. And that was made possible in order to get the resolution to zoom in this far and see that much detail and see all that dust, you have to have just an enormous number of telescopes hooked together. So it was a really important picture. In order to visit ALMA, they said that more people have summited Mount Everest than have been allowed to visit the ALMA telescope site. So when I got to go up there, they actually gave everybody supplemental oxygen because the air is so thin that you can't go up there safely without oxygen. And also I had to drive partway up, I had to take a sobriety test beforehand, which was the first time in my life I've taken a breathalyzer. I passed, thankfully, and then I was able to drive up there. And I just thought that this picture looks like Mars. Like it didn't look or feel like Earth to me while I was up there. It felt like another planet. And it really is so dry, so arid. There's no vegetation. There's hardly any water vapor in the air. It's just an incredible place. It's very otherworldly. And there you can see my friend Carla with the telescope, part of the telescope array behind her in the background, so you can kind of see what those look like. And I thought I'd just show you a quick little video I took so you could sort of experience what it feels like to be there. It was about like 28 degrees Fahrenheit when I was there, so it was pretty cold and windy. And then these are some of the 7-meter kind of smaller telescopes that are clustered together in the middle. And then you can see, if you look carefully, you can see tons of telescopes way off in the background. And they're spread out, I think they were spread out up to a few miles apart from each other. So if you got up on a hill and looked into the distance, you could see some even farther away. Okay, and just one last thing. The last day we were there, we got to have lunch with the director of ALMA, and I asked him if there was one thing that you wanted people back in the United States to know about ALMA, what would it be? And I promised him I would tell people. So now I'm fulfilling that promise. He said he wanted people to know, to be proud that we pulled it off. It's incredibly technically complicated, and it's a worldwide collaboration between so many different countries. And he said that he thought if we as a world could get together and actually do this and actually make it work worldwide, that we could accomplish anything. And so he just wanted you to feel how proud he was of that global collaboration. And that's him right there. Okay. Anyway. Okay. You're standing here. Am I out of time? Okay. So I guess I'm out of time. I just want to show you one thing super fast. And I can't because that computer's off, so, oh wait, here we go. If you are interested in working at a research facility like this or working at an observatory, there are tons of different jobs that you can get. And there are a lot of jobs in engineering and in software development and things like that. So I asked for some advice from the people who worked there, and they basically said, learn to speak Spanish or learn the language of the place where you want to work. Major in physics or computer science or something close to that. That was at Gemini, they said this. When I went to Alma, I swear I didn't rig this up. They said the exact same things. Different people. They said, be an engineer or learn Spanish and learn to write software. And then I'll just leave this quote up and I'll be done. Okay.
We've got just a couple of minutes to take a general question or two. After that, those of you who are here for extra credit can depart, and we'll take further questions from the rest of the audience. Any quick questions from the general audience to get started?
Do you feel with the way that you went through, you wanted to be an anthropologist, you wanted to be a trombone player, you went back down to college, do you feel kind of that got you on the level to speak with students in a more peer-to-peer fashion? Because a lot of the guys that come through, they don't necessarily know what they're going to do. Anything related to that in teaching, maybe?
Great question. So he asked, did going through so many different interests sort of prepare me to speak with students, because many of them don't know what they want to do necessarily either. I think so. And also another thing that I think prepared me was I was a pretty bad student. Like, honestly, I had pretty bad study skills, and a lot of my students don't have great study skills either, and I kind of know more where they're coming from because of that. So I think maybe being sort of not a perfect student is maybe even an asset for a community college teacher, and having lots of different interests. Yeah.
Okay, we're right on 5 o'clock, so the general audience, please depart as quietly as you can, and we'll take further questions. But before you do, one more round of applause for us.